Hi, my name is Sanam Zaire. I'm here with Bridget Hilton, and we're part of
A Better Shrewsbury,
which she makes me say every time exactly like that. Today we are here with Kara Berg-Powers and Heather Sabrin, and we're here to talk about mutual aid. But first, per usual, we're going to start with our random question generator. And our question is, what kind of old person do you want to grow up to become? So why don't we start with Kara?
Okay. So I saw Madonna last night in concert, and I feel like my mom's 65th was this weekend, so I feel like she would not appreciate me saying 66 is old. But I appreciated that we had like matching knee braces, just literally just being 40 for me. And I think so that like popped into my head when you said that question. And it was a really beautiful like retrospective of her whole 40-year career, which is my life. And she had 4 of her children in the show who were all incredibly talented, and just doing what she loved and being like reflective, and like there's been so much growth in her like political analysis and her accountability to other people, and I think is still growing. And so like I want to be still doing things I love with people I love and still growing.
Love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Awesome. So similarly, doing things that I love and enjoy, more like hobby oriented, giving back to the community in different ways, hopefully volunteering a lot. Yeah.
That's awesome.
About it.
Yeah. So ditto on everything else. But I will add, there's this Kimia Dawson song that I used to sing to my child when he was really little. It used to make him cry. But in the song she says, "One day I'll be an old lady with a big dress and an apron, a babushka and bare feet. I'll be out in my gardens on my hands and knees, singing a song that's really sad and sweet." And that's like the song that when I think of being an old woman, like that always pops into my head. Like I have this image of myself and out with the vegetables and, you know, and the grandkids running around and, you know, I don't know. That makes me feel warm inside.
Even in January?
Maybe not in January, but I'm probably going to retire in the global south. So I don't imagine that it'll be cold there.
That wasn't part of our plan.
I know, but
This.
we'll have to update with each other.
So similarly to everybody, I imagine myself with a large vegetable garden. I might get some chickens. I don't know. Then if I get chickens, I need goats, and if I get goats, I'll need a
probably
cow.
cow.
So I might as well have a little farm. I don't know. You know, when I first got married, my husband kind of made fun of me because I was, you know, trying to travel a lot now and doing all these trips that people usually do in their retirement. But I kind of think the opposite. I'm like, you know, now that I'm young, I'm going to do everything I possibly can since I'm, you know, physically in decent shape and I can do whatever. And then in the future, I want to just stay put and, you know, have a little vegetable garden, read the thousands of books that I accrue and never read. And then I also just want to help people. There's a few people in town, I don't want to like call them out, but there's a few people in town that I really admire because they, you know, we work with a lot of refugees, and anytime I send a text, you know, this person needs a ride, this person is hungry.
I think we should do some initials on APS and no, of course, BT. I'm like, why can't I get the other initials right? They're like our role models. So
they're amazing.
They literally,
they just.
I don't think they're watching the show, but
maybe.
But
I don't know,
just so they know.
But I would love to be them when I grow up. They just, you know, any time, literally, this person needs a ride to a doctor's appointment, and these are life-changing.
Things. It seems small for them, but for the people that they're helping, it's life-changing. So we actually go back and forth sometimes. Like, which one are you? Are you APS or BT? I'm BT today. Right. And they probably have no idea. They're probably think this is so creepy. But we do that, you know, because we really are like, that's how we want to be when our kids are gone and we can focus on the community.
Because, you know, sometimes people tell me they need something and I'd love to be able to drop everything and go do it. And I try to do what I can, but they just, you know, they do it. They clear their schedule. They just get up, roll their sleeves and do it. And I really admire that. I feel like this turned into like a poem about these two things.
This is why we want to do an award show. We've been talking about doing an award show for a long time because this is how we feel about so many people and we want to celebrate it here in town. So
a lot of people that do a lot of work are just kind of hidden in the background, which is kind
They don't
of a
want
good,
the accolades. They don't
Exactly.
want the award show.
Yeah, they're just doing it because they actually care about people, which is an awesome segue into
Yeah, to what you
mutual
guys do.
aid.
Yeah.
So maybe we could start with Kara. So you work with Mutual Aid Worcester, and you were one of the founders.
Yeah, so I say like I started Mutual Aid Worcester, by which I mean I clicked create group.
Right.
And after that, like I can't take a lot of responsibility. And my mom, who is, I would say, like the person that kind of holds it all together, says that that's something that my ADHD makes me really good at, is like trying to not be very attached to outcomes, which is a lot of work, right? Self-work. But so March 13th, 2020, which was the day my daughter's school closed, like March 12th, 2020, I might cry a little. You know, I like said goodbye to my students and like never was in person with those students again. And then went across the street to my daughter's school and picked her up. And then she did not go back to school for a year and a half. And so that Friday, I'm just like, after the Trump election, like I've been very involved in community organizing my whole life, but after the Trump election, I would have like a dream in organizing, which is not great sleep. And I would like vent to my husband, like, this should like they should do this and this and this, like about like senators, and he would be like, yeah, I agree. Like, who's gonna tell them? Yeah. Like I have a really hard time just being like, stuff's happening. Like I need to, what can I do?
Yeah.
And so I saw a lot of other spaces where mutual aid groups were forming, and I asked, like, has anyone seen anything like this in Worcester? As I didn't want to replicate the wheel. And nobody had. So I started the group, and then I reached out to folks that I knew that moderated neighborhood groups that, you know, that I noticed that they did a pretty good job keeping things chill, that were like-minded, and like had about 10 people, you know, signed up by the end of the day to help with moderating. And, you know, the group is still incredibly active, right? You know, we say like during the pandemic, but like 1,500 people a week are dying right now, right? Yeah. And a lot of the crises that were, so a colleague and I are working on a book about like teaching and learning during apocalypse, because the word permacrisis was one of our new words a few years ago in the dictionary. So this is just kind of where we are now.
So can you explain permacrisis is the concept that we're
like
gonna
we're
always
just
be
in
a
a
crisis.
right?
And so just in case someone doesn't know.
So
what's
yeah,
happening.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. And so like the needs, the things that were unveiled as needs in those first few months of the pandemic and in the time since, and of course not just the pandemic, but with our climate catastrophe, with our democratic catastrophe, with our ongoing, now kind of in a slower moving like racial reckoning, like all of these overlapping crises, right, that are that expose the needs that so many folks in our communities have, and that we have at different times, right?
And I think sometimes mask them too, right?
Yeah.
Because I think sometimes it's very easy to get caught up in what's going on with the Supreme Court and like how are they going to do this and what and that you miss sometimes just right around you the needs of people that are your neighbors and your, you know, go to school with your kids. And, you know.
Yep. Yeah, so the group has about 6,000 people in it now, and a very small group of incredibly dedicated moderators that I would not claim to be at this point. I'm in the group chat, but I'm mostly a lurker at this point, and I jump in when I like really need to. But what's been really cool to see has been a lot of the like projects and groups and relationships and like personal growth. Like my mother will share with me stories of like people that she has seen like start like, you know, being somebody that comes to the group with a need, and it's not that need has
seen that in the
disappeared,
group. Yeah,
but that they
become a giver.
Yeah, and like see the reciprocity that is supposed to be part of the mutual aid process. Not that like you could like that you should give back, like that, but I think for the givers this is important also, right? People, so much the idea of philanthropy in our society is like this benevolent like like as opposed to
like the Monopoly guy.
Right. Yeah, exactly. As opposed to this like relational process of supporting one another where we need to and receiving when we need to.
Yeah.
That's
Actually,
fantastic.
Bridget, I don't know if you remember this, but we went to one of the community refrigerators in Worcester together during the pandemic. And I remember that we put food in the refrigerator, and I was kind of, trying to teach my kids about mutual aid. And then one of them said, oh, there's a juice box. I want the juice box. And I stopped her and I said, no, don't take the juice box because I can just give you one at home. But then Bridget reminded her, no, you can take a juice box because right now you want a juice box. And that's the whole idea of mutual aid. That
That's
in this
beautiful.
moment, even though, I could go home and buy her a juice box. She's a kid. She wanted a juice box. We're bringing, we're taking. And that's, it's really shifting that idea that, there's this class of people who donates and this class of people who takes. We all need something at some point. And I love the idea of mutual aid. So I love that you highlighted that also.
Yeah.
Heather, so you started Mutual Aid Shrewsbury.
Right.
Is there, I guess the first question is there a reason why you did that instead of just kind of lumping in with Worcester?
Not necessarily, a reason to keep it separate or anything, but I had come across the page and was joined and was kind of lurking and seeing what it was all about and, wanted to give back in some way. But then in some of the other groups related to Shrewsbury, I saw people that wanted to, they were using like the recycle groups
the
or the community fridge group, or there's a lot of groups that tie together, I think, in different ways and are touching pieces of mutual aid. But I wanted to see if we could create a space within Shrewsbury and kind of mirror what you're doing in Worcester and create something for our community, because it might be more difficult for people to get to Worcester or provide assistance in Worcester. And maybe if they knew in their own neighborhood, people had needs that they would be able to, give back.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of invisible needs in Shrewsbury too. So I can imagine someone going into the mutual aid group in Worcester and people kind of scoffing that they would need assistance. So it's shining a spotlight on the fact that even though Shrewsbury is just across the bridge, there's people here that need help too, and can also give help and do some of that reciprocity. So I think it's very important to have it. And not that they can't work together, but that it shines light on the situation here. There's kids in Shrewsbury, thank God now we have the free lunch throughout the year who weren't having lunch before the pandemic, before the state got their butts in gear and decided that it was something important to do. And so I think it's important to shine a spotlight on that. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And with the 9C cuts that the governor just announced, like we don't have any, we have some ideas, and people who have done a study of all of them have some ideas about how they're going to land, but they're going to impact people in communities across the state, regardless of whether, people
zip code
see that as a need or not.
Yeah. No, it's so important. And you mentioned the recycle and the free cycle groups. And I also love those groups for that reason, because it's almost like there's no I guess, stereotyping done. There's no attribution given to the people in mutual aid, in these free cycle groups, in the community fridge group, and why I said she should grab the juice box, because it takes away some of the stigma that we have around these things. And I think that's what's so beautiful about this space, is that it doesn't matter who is giving, who is taking. It's just all everyone's. I don't know. I just it just gives me the warm fuzzies. I like it, and I hope more people, if you're not a member of the group and you're watching this, that you'll think about joining, because it is a way to detach yourself from some of that stuff that makes altruism sometimes sticky. It's kind of just separates it from all of that. It's not about being the monopoly man. It's about we're a community, and communities should band together.
Come together, yeah.
I was actually reading something, or I think I was actually watching something about this community in Southeast Asia where they don't even have a word for thank you, because the expectation is that everyone helps everyone. And so helping someone isn't seen as something that you're doing for them. It's something that you do for the community, and you're a part of the community, so that in giving you benefit. And I loved this concept, and I think that's kind of along the same lines of what you ladies have brought into our community, this idea that we are all, this is the rent we pay for our existence on the planet, and it's part of this community, and I think that's awesome.
I recently read actually on your recommendation, Braiding Sweetgrass, and it's a book written by an Indigenous author, and she really kind of talks about this Indigenous idea of I will grow the sweetgrass and you will grow the potatoes and you will grow the beans and we will all just share with each other. And we've moved so far from that in our society where everybody expects something. You post it on Facebook Marketplace, instead of just, giving, taking back.
Right.
So what are some of the biggest needs that you've seen in mutual aid during the pandemic, I guess, and has it changed since then, or are they all mostly the same types of needs?
That's a great question. I think that there are some that are the same, and there's definitely been some like evolution. One of the coolest things that I learned recently from my mom, who I said was, I think, kind of the glue right now holding mutual aid Worcester together. One of the main moderators is that one of the cool sort of fourth walls that's come down through this group is that a lot of folks that are in more institutional spaces of power in the city, whether it's in the city government itself or in Worcester Community Action Council, which does a lot of managing of federal grants for things like youth works and heating oil assistance, things like that, kind of keep an eye on the group to see what some of those trends are, what some of the needs are, and to be responsive to folks. So, it's really easy to be frustrated if you're someone who has an emergency need, right? You need rental assistance immediately. You don't know where you're sleeping tonight and you have a child. To have people say oh, well, there's this support available. And it also feels a little bit different when it's somebody who actually does that work and is come to my office right now, right?
Yeah.
And so I think to me, that's a really cool barrier that has come down. And I think that a lot of the same day-to-day needs still happen, right? Food insecurity, housing insecurity. There's a lot of political fights in Worcester right now around homelessness as a political issue that is very dehumanizing, quite frankly, and that a lot of the unhoused folks in our community are spoken about so derogatorily by folks with the power to do more about the causes of homelessness. And I think that ability to ask folks directly for, and to see the ways that the systems have cracks, right? So oftentimes when people say I need $100 till tomorrow to pay for another night in the hotel while we're waiting for this, and people say, well, if you do this and this and this, and they're like, no, I did all those things.
Yeah, I need the $100. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of those lessons come through that conversation. And there is a need that someone had last week, and a couple of people had commented oh, well, you should just do this thing or whatever. And multiple people under it were if you can't help, you can just move on.
Yeah, right.
And so the fact that it's not just moderators that are reinforcing those
the culture.
norms.
I actually wanted to ask about that because I know that some people, they hesitate to fulfill, money requests in particular, certain narratives that people are afraid that they're going to be giving money for something that maybe they don't want to give money to. And I know that's completely against the philosophy of mutual aid. And so what would you just say to someone who's I want to help, but I'm scared that if I give you $100 that you're going to buy something illicit or you're going to do something with that money that I didn't agree to? How would you talk to someone like that? Because I know there's a lot of people probably watching this show who feel that way, who they want to help, but they have hesitation for that reason. What's the mutual aid response, I guess, to that?
I don't want to
No,
all the talking.
go ahead.
I mean, so to me, it fundamentally comes back. I will say that this is a big learning, I think, for the mutual aid group over coming up on 4 years. Is I do, and my good friend Mariana has recently talked about how do we create more spaces for the political education piece of it, right? That this isn't just about asking and giving, but it is about creating different ways of doing and thinking. And so I think continuing to do that political education is really important about how we're in community and space together. And I think fundamentally for me, what's really important, and to me, this isn't just a mutual aid, but I was a nonprofit executive director for 12 years. And this is how foundations operate also, right? Here's how we want you to spend this money exactly. to the people who are doing the work, right? And I think we have to trust that the folks who have the needs know what the needs are. And that takes some introspection. But I think it's basically just asking ourselves, like, if we are willing to give something, then it's not ours anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
And that means that we don't put conditions on it. We don't say, here's the report back I need of how this happened. And you hope you're putting good into the world. And I think that our belief in the abundance of other people has to outweigh our fear that of this sort of scarcity mentality that somebody's always trying to get one over on us. And that permeates our whole culture, right? When we think about how we talk about students and discipline, how we talk about, even like for me, so I'm in education, surprise, like grading, right? And I have been a very big proponent of ungrading as much as possible. And what I have found is that enables me to focus on my students' learning. We focus on the feedback, and we focus on the growth to the next level of a project. And people will say, well, like, what's to like motivate them then? And I'm like, the learning. And actually,
Right.
When I was a nonprofit executive director, the last year I was there, we redid our employee handbook, and we're currently doing this on a board that I'm in an organization where I'm the board chair, and we went to unlimited time off. And one of the things that's really important is you have to do the cultural work when you do something like that, because that first took off in Silicon Valley, and what that ended up being was just because the culture was still nose to the grindstone.
No one took time off.
Nobody took time off, and then they just didn't have to pay any out when people left, right? Because there's no tabulation. And so you have to be intentional about, like, actually, like, there's a cultural expectation here that you are taking at least like 5 days off a quarter, right? You have like 4 weeks time off. And people would say, like, you have unlimited time off. Like, what's to stop people from just calling in all the time? And I'm like, well, like,
They need to
pay
spend
their
the
bills.
time.
their accountability to their colleagues that they care about and the work that they care about.
Yeah.
And so I think it really is, like, that's one of the things that can transform through thinking critically about those, like, small interactions of, like, do I give this person who's on the corner $1 even if I don't know how they're going to spend it? That can help us really transform how we're thinking in all these other spaces in our lives as well.
I think that's absolutely true. And something else that I like about the group too is that I think people do hesitate with the money thing, and I think that you have to detach yourself in order to give money to anybody. I give my kid $20 and I have to say, if he wants to spend it on Gushers and soda, that's his $20. That's part of it. But something else within the groups that I've noticed is people say, I need diapers. I need a food gift card. I need, concrete things. So if you're someone that maybe feels a funny way about the money transactions, which is, a position that you can take, there are other opportunities to assist people in the community that don't necessarily involve shelling over cash.
I think that's where we see some of the overlap too from like the recycle group, like, oh, my kid's out of diapers now. Like, I have this to offer up. So like a good place for people to use either space depending on, where they think there's either a need or where they want to offer it up.
I think that's great.
I think part of the problem is that it's kind of what you were talking about the cultural shift that we need to make in our society. We place a almost monetary value on our feelings when we donate, which is kind of a weird thing. Like, I see it all the time.
Even in kind things,
Yeah, in kind things. Like, I have a bag of used 3T clothing and I need to give it to someone in need. And then, people post their stories under the post, and then everyone's like, oh, I'd love to give to you. And then you're gaining that feel good, like that feeling of like, I have helped someone today, instead of just saying, I have a bag of clothes, don't care why you need it, here it is, take it, you don't have to put your story here, and that's it. And then kind of a comment on something you guys were talking about a few minutes ago, in those moments where you're asked for cash, you don't have any control over what that person does. The only thing that you can control is who you are in that moment. And I think that's another thing that that I've been trying to teach my kids, because, you know, they see people on the side of the street and they always want to give cash. And I want them to be the type of person that wants to give the cash. So I'm not teaching them that person might go and buy drugs, or might actually have a home and just be on the street for no reason. Like, those things don't matter. I want my kids to be the type of people that if somebody needs something, you just give it to them. And I think that's the best we can really do.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think too, you know, when we think about it, like, you know, there's so many people in the world that are gonna in mutual aid and in the world that would ask me for a $20 bill. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, I can give this person the $20 bill, but I don't know what they're gonna do with it. But I think to myself, I wouldn't want to be in their position. So if they're gonna spend that $20 bill and do something with it that's gonna give them a fleeting feeling of joy or whatever it is, whatever they determine that their needs are, I feel like that's my rent. Like, that's what I'm doing. If you decide what you want to do with it, I know that you're in a tough position. I wouldn't necessarily want to be in that position, so have at it. Like, you know. And so I think that's something important, and I think something kids can learn pretty early. I know that when my children exchange gifts, it's like, but I got you that, and you're supposed to no. That's not the way it works.
Right. Not
And so that's
accounting.
not accounting.
That's not how relationships
Not
work.
how relationships work. Not relationships that are going to work.
Right.
So I mean, I think I think we have a brain trust here for when we all retire. That's going to be possible for us to maybe do this in perpetuity when we're older, just having free exchange of ideas and things and money and things that help people to live more fulfilling lives. So I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to start these groups, for being a part of this movement to get our community to be more generous and more involved. And I just hope that you guys will let me wear my babushka and pull up my bootstraps and come in and help to do this work. So thank you both so very much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Okay.